Like the ebbing tides of an endless sandy shoreline, vast eras rise and fall within the silent currents of time. As the primeval storms of Mesopotamian antiquity finally subsided, an era of unprecedented peace would come to take their place for many thousands of years, settling over the ancient mud-brick cities in a warm embrace, and lulling the entire celestial court into a complacent slumber. But is our seemingly finite destiny ever truly locked in place, if even the most sacred, predetermined fates of humanity can be suddenly rewritten when the highest celestial authorities falter their watchful gaze? Drift back through the heavy, fragrant mists of ancient history, settling softly into those quiet, cooling shadows of an enclosed Babylonian courtyard. There, resting peacefully beneath a luminous, rotating canopy of distant stars, a weary scribe sinks slowly into a deeply mesmerizing slumber, completely surrendering his tired mind to a mystical vision sent directly from the divine realm of heavenly gods residing far above. This scribe is the author of a mystical poem spanning 5 clay tablets, a haunting vision that would eventually be recorded and known as the Epic of Erra and Ishum. Within the context of this ancient record, we explore how Mesopotamian mythology evolved alongside its expanding mortal populations, charting a hypnotic journey of the legendary Tablet of Destinies as its majestic path is traced from the original hands of its Anunnaki creators, directly into the quiet shadowed archives of dedicated divine scribes. The heat of the sun slowly releases from hard stone pathways, as his slow breath synchronizes perfectly with the steady rhythmic turning of the great celestial wheel. Earthly sensations of bustling daytime avenues slowly fade into a quiet, comforting numbness, leaving only an empty void waiting to receive this cosmic wisdom. Suspended effortlessly within this dark refuge of human consciousness, his wandering spirit detaches entirely from all rigid boundaries of the physical realm. Every softly spoken syllable ripples gently across his resting consciousness, like sweet water flowing down a winding river channel, carrying insightful secrets of primeval creation. Cooling night winds sweep smoothly through deserted corridors of the sleeping metropolis as he slept, carrying a faint metallic scent of mineral-rich water from the nearby Euphrates River. This gentle atmospheric current wraps the massive stone walls of Babylon in a comforting, ethereal chill, soothing the exhausted muscles of thousands of resting laborers. In the hazy veil of this otherworldly dream, a magnificent epic is faintly whispered through the thick blanket of midnight, further revealing the cyclical nature inherent throughout the very fabric of our universe. This sweeping narrative unfolds long after the primeval wars with the dragon goddess found in the Enuma Elish. This sleeping archivist bore silent witness to a dramatic cosmic shift, watching the majestic golden age unravel into a chaotic whirlwind of divine jealousy and unchecked devastation. Swirling shadows dance softly across the edges of his resting consciousness, painting vivid pictures of a restless god plotting a violent rebellion. He dreams of towering mud-brick temples stripped of their radiant glory, and sweeping agricultural plains plunged into a sudden, bitter stillness. These haunting whispers carried on the cooling night wind speak of a vacant celestial throne, warning the vulnerable mortal realm that the absolute laws of the universe can be quickly undone by even a single, momentary distraction. A heavy fragrance of burning cedar resin mingles with the bitter scent of impending ruin, guiding his wandering mind through this dark labyrinth of cosmic betrayal. Yet hidden within this terrifying vision of ultimate destruction, a steady voice of reason emerges, offering a bright glimmer of hope for a shattered terrestrial empire. As this mystical dream gently fades into the cool morning air, it leaves behind a deep and abiding understanding of the fragile cosmic balance. Ancient priests and devoted scholars dedicated their entire existence to understanding the sacred decrees handed down from the distant heavens. Mortal caretakers slowly realized that the vast inner workings of their reality required constant vigilance to maintain the flawless harmony of their daily lives. As the sprawling mud-brick cities of Mesopotamia grew in unimaginable power and complexity, so too did their deep reverence for the radiant Tablet of Destinies. The heavy earthen ledger was no longer viewed merely as a static object of supreme power, but rather as an active and impossibly complex administrative heart of the cosmos. This profound change in cultural memory perfectly reflected the shift to a new era in the celestial hierarchy, where the peaceful reign of the gods would soon be tested once again by shadows gathering in the dark. If you are listening to this in the still quiet of the night, let us know where and when you are joining us from in the comments section. There is something comforting in realizing countless listeners scattered across distant lands and different time zones, all settling into the same quiet journey through the forgotten echoes of human history. And if you are enjoying this boring history narrative, finding it helps you relax or even drift off, consider subscribing to the channel. It helps support our efforts to keep bringing you these ancient stories each week, and continue reaching others who are searching for the same calm place to relax and unwind. If you would like uninterrupted sleep and longer versions, those are available to you through the Legends of the Dawn membership. Now, we return to our ancient scribe and his story that has survived in the form of clay tablets created from the fresh, cool mud of ancient Mesopotamian rivers. As dawn breaks, the scribe picks up his reed stylus, determined to immortalize this grand journey in permanent earthen records, capable of carrying its mythical chronicles through the unfolding centuries yet to come. High above the bustling mud-brick streets of Babylon, the supreme champion Marduk, son of Enki, sat proudly upon his elevated celestial throne. Resting securely across his divine chest was the glowing Tablet of Destinies, a heavy clay ledger that radiated pure mathematical harmony downward into the fertile river valleys. Under his watchful gaze, the sprawling universe fell into a long and highly predictable rhythm that guided the agricultural seasons with absolute precision. A soothing, resonant vibration hummed throughout the deepest foundations of the earth, ensuring that the rushing atmospheric winds never breached the borders of the peaceful settlements. This flawlessly managed cosmic clockwork lulled the entire divine pantheon of Anunnaki gods into a deep sense of security, allowing the immortal creators to finally surrender their heavy burdens of continuous administration. Wandering planets drifted lazily along the golden equatorial band, trusting completely in the absolute authority radiating from the ancient capital. Even the deepest subterranean waters of the abyss flowed with a gentle and unhurried grace, mirroring the profound serenity that blanketed the heavens above. It seemed to both mortals and deities alike that the sweeping terrestrial plains were forever insulated against the terrifying chaos of their primeval past. But a flawless existence maintained without constant vigilance is highly susceptible to the slow, creeping deterioration of time. As countless centuries drifted by in this state of continuous harmony, the great champion slowly grew far too comfortable in his majestic isolation, becoming increasingly detached from the daily terrestrial rhythms of the resting earth. His once radiant royal garments began to lose their blinding luster, while beautiful statues resting in his quiet sanctuaries began to tarnish from subtle and unseen neglect. This lack of oversight allowed quiet cracks to form within the foundational pillars of his sprawling empire, weakening the invisible boundaries that had protected the sleeping populations for so long. The protective magic that had previously nourished the deep roots of civilization began to wane, inadvertently allowing human society to fall into a state of highly vulnerable disarray. Small fractures in the social order slowly widened into deep chasms of unrest as the harmonious melodies of the cosmos grew faint and distant over the endless flat plains. Unpredictable friction returned to the winding avenues of the early metropolis, replacing the sweet scent of blooming reeds with the sharp scent of impending ruin. Exhausted mortal laborers looked upward into the silent night sky, praying for a reassuring sign from the supreme architect, who seemed to have completely forgotten his earthly garden. The celestial authorities remained comfortably asleep upon their high temple platforms, oblivious to the creeping shadows slowly gathering around the fragile edges of the tangible world. These expanding cracks in the heavenly administration fittingly reflect upon a very real and devastating era of chaos that plagued the lands of ancient Babylonia. Scribes working in the fragrant tablet houses during the early first millennium documented a terrifying period, marked by severe famine and bitter war. Foreign invasions swept violently across the flat green plains, completely disrupting the highly structured agricultural networks that had sustained the ancient empires for countless generations. Wandering nomadic tribes pushed deep into the fertile valleys, bringing an unprecedented wave of lawlessness that shattered the remaining fragments of societal order. The historical reality of this prolonged instability was carefully woven into the fabled mythological narrative of the Epic of Erra and Ishum. Ancient theologians sought to explain their devastating geopolitical trauma as a direct reflection of divine activity, viewing the sudden collapse of central governance as a terrifying shift in the heavens above. To the weary minds of the Mesopotamian populations, such widespread destruction could only be the result of a dark and volatile force rising up from the shadows. The poetic verses of their epic tale introduced a terrifying new antagonist named Erra, the restless and unpredictable god of war, plague, and sudden pestilence. He despised the peaceful and orderly universe managed by a comfortable Marduk, desiring only to plunge the carefully structured world back into the deafening roar of primordial turmoil. Simmering with a brewing jealousy, this volatile deity paced furiously through the hidden corners of the celestial realm, finding a grim kinship with a group of fierce and untamed warrior demons known throughout the ancient lore as the Sabiti. These 7 demonic entities were born directly from the seed of the great sky father An, planted deep within the soft and yielding earth of the lower world. Ancient theologians reveal that the great sky father did not forge these entities out of sheer malice, but rather designed them to serve as a terrifying cosmic defense mechanism. He carefully presented these fierce weapons to the restless god of war, instructing him to keep their fury contained until the delicate balance of the universe required intervention, decreeing their grim destinies as a necessary force of ultimate correction. Rising from the dark soil as personified aspects of pure devastation, the Sabiti represented the absolute and untamed destructive forces of wild nature. Ancient clay records paint a truly terrifying picture of these 7 spirits, describing them with the fearsome faces of roaring lions and breath that burned like venomous fire. They possessed an inherent and insatiable hunger for violence, serving as the ultimate and merciless weapons for the restless god of plague. Unlike the benevolent deities who found restorative solace in the quiet turning of the stars, these nefarious manifestations thrived only in the wild fury of the storm. The long and unbroken peace established by the Supreme Champion offered them no satisfying purpose, leaving their destructive energies to fester in the cold shadows of the void. They constantly gathered around Erra, whispering treacherous and seductive words of rebellion directly into his ears. These silver-tongued demons complained bitterly that the long centuries of tranquility had made their sharp weapons dull, and their warrior spirits incredibly soft. Furthermore, they claimed that the constant bustling noise of human civilization rising from the sprawling mud-brick cities severely disturbed their needed rest. Using every dark manipulation at their disposal, they actively incited the plague god to rise up and wage a merciless war against the resting earth. Their venomous whispers slowly poisoned his already envious heart, convincing him that the ultimate authority over the cosmos rightfully belonged to the forces of chaos. Erra gazed toward the glowing high throne of Babylon, plotting a dark and sinister scheme to unseat the complacent king of the gods. He knew that the heavy earthen ledger of destinies could not be taken by brute force, requiring a much more cunning approach to finally shatter the peaceful harmony of the turning universe. The restless god of pestilence listened intently to the soothing flattery of his 7 demonic weapons, allowing their wicked counsel to solidify his devastating intentions. A direct assault upon the supreme champion would only end in his own ruin, forcing him to devise a brilliant strategy built entirely upon elegant deception. Gathering the creeping shadows of the void around him like a heavy cloak, Erra prepared to step out from the darkness and approach the radiant capital of the ancient world. Drifting seamlessly from those outer shadows of antiquity, the god of war ascended slowly toward that magnificent mud-brick sanctuary of Babylon. He walked with an elegant grace, completely devoid of his usual violent tempest, masking a deeply envious heart beneath a calm demeanor. This restless god of pestilence knew brute force would prove entirely useless against such a supreme champion, choosing instead to wield a far more subtle weapon of silver-tongued persuasion. He carefully calculated every single step across those wide stone thresholds, ensuring his sudden arrival appeared as a humble visit of profound respect. The volatile god suppressed his natural instinct for immediate war, burying his dark ambitions beneath a thick veneer of polite diplomacy. This highly sophisticated strategy required flawless execution, demanding a perfect manipulation of an immortal ego that had grown accustomed to endless worship. Stepping softly into those high, luminous halls, he found Marduk resting peacefully upon his elevated celestial throne. That heavy clay ledger of universal fates sat securely against his divine chest, emitting a faint pulse of raw cosmic energy. Erra bowed his head in mock reverence, offering beautifully crafted words of false admiration. This cunning antagonist spoke with a soothing voice, echoing like a gentle summer breeze rustling through dense river reeds. He praised his ancient counterpart for maintaining such a long era of unbroken tranquility across those sprawling terrestrial plains. Hidden carefully within this sweet flattery was a highly calculated seed of doubt, designed to slowly unravel the king's comfortable mindset of absolute security. Ancient Sumerian texts speak of this subtle psychological maneuver designed to break down walls that even the fiercest weapons could never pierce. Erra paced slowly across the polished stone floor, weaving a hypnotic web of feigned concern for his sovereign leader. He spoke of passing ages carrying away the vibrant essence of early creation, leaving behind only exhausted remnants of a once glorious dawn. Moving closer to the radiant seat of power, Erra gazed upward to make a profound observation regarding that magnificent royal attire. He softly pointed out how countless passing centuries had quietly stolen the once blinding luster from Marduk's sacred garments. The magnificent crown resting upon his head had grown visibly dull tarnished by ages of subtle neglect, while carefully tending to his kingdom. And those flawless statues adorning the quiet earthly sanctuaries were slowly losing their breathtaking polish, dimming the glorious reflection of heavenly authority. This dark visitor reminded his rival of a primeval era, when those majestic robes shined intensely with pure solar radiance, sending a pure tension-resolving frequency to permeate the untamed universe. The vibrant luminescence that once held chaotic saltwater tides and monstrous dragon goddesses at bay had slowly diminished into a fading echo of its original majesty. Erra lamented this slow deterioration with masterful sorrow, weaving an intoxicating spell of pure vanity around the king, suggesting that his complacent reign over such a tranquil world had inadvertently drained the vital celestial energy from his holy vestments, reflecting a tragic fading of his absolute supremacy. The proud champion listened intently to these silver-tongued whispers, feeling a sudden surge of unexpected shame regarding his diminishing splendor, a brilliant deception that easily bypassed every formidable defense under his command. A heavy silence stretched across the vast assembly hall, allowing those poisonous words to sink deeply into his immortal mind. Marduk looked down upon his worn golden threads, recognizing the bitter truth hidden within this treacherous observation. Any flawless perfection of his cosmic reign was physically eroding, threatening to diminish his absolute standing among the watchful pantheon. Seizing this fleeting moment of insecurity, the plague god gently offered a seemingly perfect solution to restore that lost magnificence. He proposed that the Supreme Creator should temporarily leave his watchful post to seek absolute purification deep below the yielding terrestrial crust. Erra spoke warmly, painting a highly vivid picture of those pure subterranean fresh waters resting quietly within the uncharted abyss, promising they possessed a deeply restorative magic. This pure subterranean sanctuary had once served as a flawless biological forge for the wise water god Enki during the earliest days of creation. Its deep, unhurried currents were said to hold a uniquely invigorating essence, capable of washing away the heaviest burdens of divine administration. Plunging his heavy crown into that sweet primeval ocean would instantly wash away every layer of accumulated worldly dust. A thorough cleansing within those unhurried currents would return the blinding glow to his frayed woven robes, renewing his unquestioned majesty in full. This cunning deceiver assured his host that such a brief departure would cause absolutely no harm to the eternal mechanism of the cosmic wheel. Merely a brief immersion in those sacred waters would effortlessly strip away any lingering tarnish, restoring his pure, blinding aura of supreme command. Thoroughly captivated by this mesmerizing vision, he yearned to feel that cool, refreshing magic wash over his exhausted frame, and return to his high throne with a renewed physical perfection that would command absolute awe from the younger generation of deities. Erra helped to solidify his longing, spinning a mesmerizing vision of a renewed king returning to his high terrace, burning brighter than the glowing morning sun itself. This flawless imagery catered directly to a deeply ingrained desire to maintain absolute perfection over the flourishing earthly garden. Meanwhile, Erra promised to stand as a loyal guardian over those empty halls, while his senior counterpart embarked to restore his glory. He vowed to maintain the flawless alignment of wandering stars, ensuring that no sudden chaos could threaten sleeping agricultural settlements. This articulate deception resonated beautifully within Marduk's tired mind, completely obscuring the truly sinister motive hiding just beneath the war god's friendly facade. Marduk made the fateful decision to temporarily step away from his heavy cosmic duties. He slowly unfastened that glowing ledger of universal destinies, leaving its immense power unprotected upon a high stone altar. Rising from an elevated dais, the proud god descended toward the quiet depths of the underwater abyss, seeking to reclaim a fading echo of his primeval youth. His heavy celestial weapons were set aside in the desperate pursuit of restored pride. A gentle silence fell over that magnificent inner chamber as the great champion willingly surrendered his physical connection to the vast cosmic network. The Tablet of Destinies remained entirely unguarded, pulsing softly with an exposed and highly vulnerable magic. The sweet fragrance of nearby burning cedar resin lingered thickly in the air as his radiant silhouette disappeared down the winding stone corridor. Deep rhythmic hums of distant planetary gears continued their slow rotation, completely unaware of the tragic shift in cosmic authority. An entire pantheon of watchful deities slept soundly, trusting blindly in a secure foundation that was now rapidly fracturing. His majestic departure echoed softly down those descending stairways, leaving the ultimate seat of governance completely empty. For an agonizingly brief moment, a profound stillness swept across the upper atmosphere, holding the delicate balance of existence in absolute suspense. Any supreme architecture of a beautifully managed sky suddenly lacked its vital stabilizing anchor. Standing alone within that deserted throne room, Erra gazed triumphantly upon the undefended expanse of sleeping mud-brick cities. This masterful deception had successfully severed the ancient protective tether, clearing a direct path for untamed forces of nature to rise once again. He reveled in the sudden terrifying power that coursed through his own veins, intoxicated by the total lack of opposition. The fierce demonic warriors of the Sabiti whispered excitedly from the darkest edges of his mind, urging him to unleash their uncompromising fury. The deafening roar of primordial turmoil was finally ready to shatter the beautifully constructed peace that had endured for countless generations. That glowing clay tablet pulsed quietly upon its cold stone pedestal, abandoned by the benevolent hand that once carefully directed its magic. A terrifying shadow began to slowly expand across those sacred celestial blueprints, threatening to rewrite the peaceful destiny of all living creatures. Our fragile reality was now left entirely at the mercy of a volatile storm, completely defenseless against the coming tide of unyielding destruction. The flawless universal rhythm ground to a sudden halt, marking a devastating transition into an petrifying era of absolute darkness. By shedding his radiant crown and descending into the watery depths of the Apsu, Marduk thoroughly severed that sacred protective bond, tying Anunnaki creators directly to their glowing Tablet of Destinies. Leaving a fragile earthly realm completely unanchored, abandoning the sprawling terrestrial empire to pure chance. The golden resonant frequencies that once vibrated endlessly now began to falter, plunging the heavenly sanctuaries into an erratic rhythm. Without a benevolent king to guide its magic, our entire universe drifted aimlessly like a rudderless boat upon a dark, stormy sea. Erra stepped eagerly toward the elevated pedestal, reaching his hands toward the pulsating earthen stone that governed all reality. He gleefully commandeered the highest authority of the heavens. Gazing down upon a defenseless world, he felt the intoxicating surge of absolute power coursing through his immortal veins. The gentle, steady turning of ancient cosmic gears shuddered violently, forced to obey the dark commands of this volatile new master. Sitting proudly upon the deserted throne, Erra embraced the suffocating silence. He relished the success of his eloquent deception, marveling at how easily the king had surrendered all of his great power. A sinister smile crossed his face as he finally grasped his complete dominion over the countless sleeping mortals resting blindly far below. Thick, suffocating shadows gathered rapidly around the high throne, answering a sinister call of this newly crowned deity of plagues and war. He quickly turned his attention toward the 7 fierce demonic warriors of destruction, finally granting them permission to strike. The war god proudly unleashed these terrifying Sebiti upon human populations, directing their untamed fury toward the sprawling agricultural empires. These ferocious entities rushed vigorously from the dark corners of the celestial realm, howling like a bitter winter wind. Ancient lore depicts them with fearsome faces of roaring lions, exhaling a toxic breath that burned like venomous fire. They plunged rapidly through the bitterly cold upper atmosphere. The soothing silver light of familiar constellations was instantly choked out by their descent, replaced by an unnatural creeping gloom. A heavy weight of despair fell across winding avenues, suffocating the sweet scent of blooming reeds with the acrid, metallic aroma of desolation. Sleeping mortals woke suddenly in absolute terror, sensing that their protective tether to benevolent gods had been brutally severed. Mud brick cities plunged abruptly into a chaotic whirlwind of sudden pestilence. A terrifying sickness swept rapidly through the once vibrant delta, draining vital energy from exhausted laborers of terrestrial plains. As those 7 demons tore through the once peaceful settlements, the meticulously engraved fates of our world were violently blurred upon the holy clay. Glowing cuneiform inscriptions that once promised a secure future began to fade into a dark, illegible smear of tragic uncertainty. Every delicate wedge pressed into soft river mud lost its pristine clarity, throwing the world completely out of alignment. Overarching destinies of mankind and the universe at large were actively rewritten by malevolent forces, erasing the protective blueprints of the Holy May. Without these sacred celestial instructions to guide them, highly organized networks of human cooperation fractured into isolated fragments of fear. The once harmonious melodies of temple musicians were quickly drowned out by harsh, dissonant noise of brothers turning against brothers in the darkened streets. Trust dissolved completely into thin air, leading inevitably to an agonizingly bitter civil war. People abandoned their carefully tended gardens, fleeing aimlessly into the barren desert in a desperate attempt to escape the invisible, sweeping plague which now cursed the lands. Wandering nomadic tribes pushed aggressively into fertile river valleys, completely ignoring the previously established boundaries of a faltering ancient empire. With them came an unprecedented wave of lawlessness, further shattering the remaining fragments of central governance that previously anchored the sprawling metropolis. Soon famine settled deeply into the sun-baked soil, transforming vibrant pastures into dusty, barren wastelands devoid of all vital moisture. Weary farmers watched helplessly as their carefully planned crops withered away, starved by an unnatural heat radiating from dark skies. A terrifying silence replaced the usually familiar sounds of grinding stone, signaling a complete collapse of all earthly productivity. With every passing day, the magnificent harmony established by earlier creators slipped further and further into a dark, impenetrable abyss. The once predictable rising of golden mornings was constantly delayed by thick, unnatural clouds of dark atmospheric smoke. Early humanity was left to wander aimlessly through decaying streets. Winding irrigation canals were left choked with debris, starving the parched soil. Towering mud brick sanctuaries slowly began to crumble from neglect, losing their radiant polish as daily rituals of devotion were entirely abandoned. Sprawling urban centers that took countless ages to construct seemed to regress backward into a primitive, untamed wilderness. It was a complete unraveling of delicate cultural progress, reversing a beautiful harmony that had been so carefully nurtured by the wise water god. Sleeping populations were plunged deeply into a void of uncertainty, tossing restlessly upon their woven reed mats, plagued by terrifying visions of a world rapidly falling out of balance. They could no longer trace the familiar patterns of protective constellations watching overhead, as heavy storms completely obscured the crystalline expanse. Without a divine anchor to guide them, a devastating sense of isolation gripped every beating heart within this ancient empire. Winding currents of the Euphrates River seemed to slow their steady pace, absorbing the oppressive atmosphere descending from the churning sky. These ancient waters ran black with despair, mourning the loss of their benevolent ruler. Every mortal spirit waited in a state of suspended animation, praying desperately for a miraculous recovery. High above the unraveling terrestrial plains, Erra watched the rampant devastation with a triumphant pride. He reveled in the chaotic symphony of his untamed weapons, believing his violent rebellion had permanently erased the complacent reign of Marduk. This volatile deity paced across the polished stone floors of the sanctuary, completely intoxicated by his newly acquired dominion over a fragile earth. His demonic forces continued to roam freely through heavy shadows, stripping the fertile delta of its bountiful organic harvest. The deafening roar of primordial chaos drowned out all quiet sighs of nature, replacing serene order with absolute pandemonium. This merciless war against our resting earth threatened to bring about a total, unforgiving annihilation. The invisible demons' twisted forms danced wildly across the expansive lands, relishing the bitter suffering of mankind. They fed upon the overwhelming terror generated by this sudden, inexplicable disruption. It was a brutal reminder that lurking forces were always waiting patiently for a chance to strike. Dust storms whipped violently across the flat plains, and the beautiful geometric architecture of early humanity was slowly ground down into scattered debris, swallowed endlessly by a creeping wasteland. Yet even within this suffocating atmosphere of complete cosmic despair, a faint spark of profound intelligence refused to simply stand by as the world was extinguished. It was not a fate passively accepted by every member of the celestial court. A stabilizing figure watched this madness unfold from the quiet edges of heaven, deeply troubled by the unchecked rage of his master. Such excessive, senseless slaughter would eventually destroy the very foundation of their own divine existence. He knew the relentless fury of the plague god had to be carefully contained before our fragile universe was permanently broken. Stepping softly out from gathering shadows, a wise, eloquent counselor prepared to offer a brilliant defense. This noble deity was known to ancient priests as Ishum, the wise and loyal Vizier of the restless plague god. He gazed downward upon the burning agricultural gardens with immense sorrow, unwilling to watch early humanity perish beneath such senseless, untamed fury. The eloquent counselor stood bravely as the final barrier between terrified mortal populations and their total annihilation. He understood that raising heavy weapons of war against his volatile master would only multiply the rampant destruction sweeping across the fertile southern delta. Salvation required a much softer approach, once again relying entirely upon the captivating magic of an eloquent, well-reasoned speech. Ishum glided gracefully into the captured high sanctuary of Babylon, where Erra sat intoxicated by his stolen glory. The gentle Vizier carried no sharpened spears or drawn wooden bows into that deserted, echoing temple complex. His persona exuded a calm, peaceful demeanor in a calculated strategy carefully designed to manipulate Erra's arrogant immortal ego. His rationalizing words washed over the entire throne room with the grace of a river swelling slowly to meet the eminence of the sea. This brilliant mediator began his delicate intervention by heaping lavish, poetic flattery upon the volatile deity of war, praising the terrifying magnitude of those recent conquests, acknowledging that Erra had successfully proven his absolute supremacy over all earthly domains. The wicked antagonist listened closely, feeding his immense vanity with sweet, respectful words of admiration. Ishum patiently reasoned with the proud conqueror, reminding him that a true sovereign requires a thriving, populous kingdom to properly worship his greatness. If every last human laborer was washed away into a dark void, there would be no voices left to sing his majestic praises. He conjured a vivid vision of empty, barren temples, where fragrant incense would never again burn in honor of the victorious plague god and his triumphs. This wise counselor questioned the value of ruling over a silent, dusty wasteland devoid of all vibrant life. He suggested that true power lay not in total erasure, but in commanding the absolute reverence of a flourishing, grateful civilization. To completely extinguish the sweeping terrestrial plains would leave only an empty, hollow silence echoing through the high celestial courts. Ishum reminded his master that sweet offerings of grain and pure water relied upon the steady, devoted hands of a living workforce. Preserving a remnant of the early empire would guarantee a permanent, loyal following to forever chronicle the terrifying might of the war god. This brilliant psychological maneuvering began to slowly calm the violent storm brewing inside his envious, immortal heart. The fierce tempest of unchecked rage gradually softened into a gentle, highly pacified lull of supreme satisfaction. Erra looked down upon the terrified terrestrial landscape, his dark ambitions finally satiated by the monumental display of his own terrifying strength. A heavy, restorative silence fell over the luminous halls as the war god finally relented his merciless assault. He commanded those 7 demonic Sabiti to immediately halt their relentless march across the fertile Mesopotamian landscape. Those terrifying spirits of devastation retreated obediently back into the hidden, lightless corners of the lower earth. Charmed completely by this eloquent diplomacy, the plague god openly admitted that his dark fury had grown out of control. He confessed to his wise counselor that a blinding wave of sudden anger had driven him to ravage the innocent earthly garden. Seeking to mend the shattered settlements, he commanded his trusted Vizier to shift his role from a restraining voice of reason into a dedicated rebuilder of the fallen empire. Erra ordered Ishum to drive out the foreign nomadic invaders who had violently pillaged the fragile cities during the chaos. The wise mediator was tasked with washing away the bitter stains of war and restoring the sprawling mud-brick pathways of Babylonia to their former glory. This divine decree cleared a peaceful path for the exhausted mortal population to rise from the ashes and rebuild their sacred sanctuaries. The bitter, metallic scent of war slowly dissipated from the cooling night air, slowly but surely replaced once again by a sweet fragrance of blooming flowers. Dark clouds of sickness evaporated entirely, allowing soothing silver starlight to shine clearly upon the resting delta. A gentle, healing warmth spread across the fertile valleys, reviving the withered crops resting quietly in the fields. Civil unrest across the winding streets of the ancient metropolis faded beautifully into a quiet, restorative peace. Frightened citizens dropped their makeshift weapons, embracing their neighbors compassionately, as their long nightmare of sudden pestilence simply washed away like dry dust caught in a gentle spring rain. The harmonious turning of the celestial spheres gradually resumed its steady, comforting rhythm. The delicate cosmic balance had been gracefully salvaged by this masterful diplomacy, and soon a radiant light returned to the highest reaches of the sky. Marduk ascended gracefully from the subterranean freshwaters of the Apsu, his purification finally complete. He entered the silent throne room bathed in a blinding restorative solar aura that chased away all lingering shadows. His royal garments, once dull from centuries of neglect, now shimmered with a breathtaking brilliance. Yet as he gazed down from his high terrace, the supreme champion was struck with absolute horror at the devastated condition of his beloved city. He wept bitterly for the ravaged agricultural gardens and the crumbling temples, mourning the tragic consequence of his own temporary absence. Despite his deep sorrow over the dark manipulation that had usurped his throne, the king realized he must take immediate action to heal the frightened world. The radiant champion reclaimed his elevated seat of authority without facing any continued threat of divine conflict, ready to anchor the heavens once again. His majestic physical presence instantly stabilized the floating dance of the starry canopy, turning quietly overhead. He securely fastened the resplendent Tablet of Destinies back across his own divine chest. Pure magic flowed effortlessly from the holy clay, reawakening the familiar, soothing cadence of the vast universe. The sacred ledger of creation was permanently secured once more, casting a protective silver glow over the entire empire. Sleeping agricultural communities could once again rest safely under a flawlessly managed, peaceful night sky. The familiar, soothing songs of temple musicians echoed softly through the dusty avenues, celebrating the miraculous deliverance of their fragile world. Winding irrigation canals swelled with pure, sweet fresh water, carrying a renewed vitality directly into the thirsty basins of the lower marshes. Exhausted mortal laborers surrendered their waking consciousness to the soft, velvety shadows, drifting into a deep, uninterrupted slumber. The unbroken harmony of the ancient cosmos was beautifully restored, wrapping the fragile earthly garden in an eternal, protective embrace. But this terrifying brush with total darkness also proved that the cosmos required a more vigilant method of oversight. Leaving the central seat of heavenly governance entirely empty had nearly cost the early civilization everything it had built. The watchful pantheon was reminded of the dire importance of maintaining the cosmic ledger. They decided that a new protector would ensure that the vital seat of power was never again left unguarded. They needed a steadfast custodian who would never step away from the elevated throne room to leave the power of the tablet susceptible to the jealous eyes of wild forces. This vital realization led to a monumental shift in how the turning universe would be managed from there on. Seeking a flawless anchor for the shifting heavens, the radiant champion Marduk turned thoughtfully toward his own beloved son. This brilliant deity was known widely across the ancient world as Nabu. He possessed a deeply meditative spirit, perfectly suited for the meticulous, endless demands of cosmic administration. Nabu was revered by early populations as the ultimate patron of scribes, functioning as the eternal keeper of divine knowledge. His quiet, pensive demeanor stood in beautiful contrast to the volatile tempest of the restless plague god. He found restorative solace in the soft repetitive scrape of a reed stylus against damp river clay. Recognizing his unparalleled dedication to the sacred arts, Marduk graciously passed the heavy earthen artifact down to his capable heir. The young god inherited the great cosmic ledger from his father, humbly accepting the staggering weight of universal governance. His immortal hands grasped the radiant tablet with a calm and measured certainty. With Nabu now serving as the permanent watchman, the absolute source code of reality would never again be left unguarded. He took his place in the quiet archives of the highest heavens, surrounded by the sweet fragrance of burning cedar. The holy May resonated beautifully within his careful, mathematical mind. This peaceful transition of power introduced a highly organized, administrative rhythm back into the sprawling mud-brick cities far below. Wandering planetary spheres fell into perfect alignment with his steady and methodical celestial record-keeping. A comforting blanket of absolute security washed smoothly over the once terrified populations of the fertile delta. To ensure the continuous harmony of the expanding terrestrial gardens, a magnificent cosmic tradition was officially established. Every single spring, as the rushing rivers swelled with sweet fresh water, a grand gathering of the immortal pantheon of great Anunnaki gods took place. Ancient historians refer to this mesmerizing rhythm of renewal as the majestic assembly of the new year. During this mesmerizing celestial convergence, supreme deities traveled from the farthest corners of the universe to the radiant capital of Babylon. They arrived in a slow and hypnotic procession, taking their exalted seats within the luminous assembly halls. The massive mud-brick sanctuary hummed with a pure, tension-resolving frequency. Luminous gods sat together in absolute silence, bathed beautifully in the soft silver light of the turning constellations. They gathered specifically to consolidate their divine will for the upcoming 12 months of the earthly calendar. Every intricate detail of mortal existence was carefully debated and decided upon by these ancient creators. Sitting peacefully before this quiet, luminous assembly was the brilliant scribe god Nabu. The legendary Tablet of Destinies rested securely upon his lap, waiting patiently to receive the new edicts of the watching stars. He held his smooth wooden stylus with a relaxed and highly practiced grace. As the supreme deities reached their harmonious consensus, Nabu began the meticulous process of physically engraving their decrees. He pressed the delicate wedge-shaped markings directly into the heavy clay, recording the specific, prosperous fates of every single nation. The gentle rustling of his tools provided a deeply soothing melody for the gathered immortal court. Every flawless impression secured the bountiful agricultural harvests and gentle seasonal rains for the sprawling terrestrial empire. He carved the predetermined destinies of every sleeping individual into the damp earth, weaving their fleeting lives into the grand cosmic tapestry, and carefully locking the vast turning heavens into a comfortingly predictable rhythm. Over the passing centuries, the beautiful concept of this annual cosmic gathering echoed deeply across shifting cultural landscapes. Wandering desert tribes and later empires absorbed this mesmerizing imagery into their own developing religious traditions. The glowing clay artifact meticulously managed by Nabu directly inspired the later Near Eastern concept of a heavenly book of life. Early theologians embraced the comforting idea that a supreme ledger held the recorded fates of all humanity, finding immense psychological solace in knowing that their personal journeys were already planned out by compassionate hands. As Nabu eternally impressed his celestial decrees across the damp clay, a deep stillness descended over the winding avenues of Babylon. Through the incredibly thorough work of this patron deity of scribes, the universe functioned with a beautifully balanced grace. Earthly priests working in the fragrant tablet houses flawlessly mirrored the divine actions of their beloved patron god. They copied the sacred blueprints with their own slender reeds, maintaining the vital connection between the mortal and heavenly realms. Their steady devotion ensured that the protective magic of the cosmos flowed freely into the terrestrial realm. The celestial sphere rotated smoothly onward, driven by the quiet accounting of the stars. Cooling night winds carried the faint earthen scent of mineral-rich water across the sleeping delta. Sprawling agricultural communities could finally surrender to the descending shadows of nightfall without any lingering hesitation, for the undeniable certainty of this grand cosmic system promised that the golden sun would always rise exactly as intended. Exhausted workers rested peacefully upon their woven mats, completely wrapped in a secure and ethereal embrace. Our resting world was eternally anchored to the flawlessly turning pathways of a beautifully managed sky, welcoming a lasting era of protective magic. This new age extended far beyond the luminous halls of the highest gods, weaving itself directly into the daily lives of ancient Mesopotamians. Wandering scholars reveal a fascinating piece of world history, noting that early populations viewed the myth itself as a highly powerful talismanic amulet capable of shielding their vulnerable cities from misfortune. For Erra had promised to eternally reward anyone who honored their heroic tale. Devoted scribes laboring within the fragrant, shadowed tablet houses would meticulously copy specific snippets of these mythological verses onto small pieces of damp river clay. They carefully shaped these earthen fragments to resemble delicate pendants, firing them in hot kilns until the protective words were permanently locked into solid form. These magical talismans were then hung peacefully upon the thick mud brick walls of humble dwellings, serving to safely insulate sleeping families against various ailments and warding off dark shadows. The physical presence of these small baked tablets resting above wooden doorways offered great comfort. As cooling evening breezes swept smoothly across the flat green valleys, they carried the sweet scent of blooming reeds over these inscribed amulets, activating a silent layer of divine defense. Every carefully pressed cuneiform wedge acted as a quiet sentinel in the dark, ensuring that no misfortune would ever breach the peaceful threshold of the mortal world. High above this shielded terrestrial garden, Nabu sits within the highest starry archives, his slender reed stylus eternally gliding across the heavy cosmic ledger, beautifully capturing the flawless mathematics of the universe with a patient devotion. The quiet rustling of his smooth wooden tools synchronizes beautifully with the resting amulets hanging softly upon the doors of resting mud brick homes below, creating an elegant harmony between them. This unbroken rhythm of celestial accounting weaves a comforting lullaby that resonates beautifully across the expansive currents of deep time. Those ancient tales have left a lasting impression upon all of humanity, whispering their secrets across countless ages of shifting empires. Mothers sang soothing verses of this primeval epic to their children, transforming the shadowed history of the cosmos into a beautiful song of eternal salvation. Their soft voices drifted upward to mingle with the pure silver light of the stars, gracefully bridging the vast gap between the muddy delta and the rotating canopy overhead. This shared cultural memory cultivated an unshakable faith in the benevolent architects of the universe, proving that even the greatest of storms could be calmed by the power of reason. The heat of day slowly releases from the winding streets of ancient Babylonia, dissolving completely into the ether, to be replaced by a fragrant, ethereal mist rolling slowly over the quiet southern delta. Rhythmic breathing from the slumbering mud brick cities blends seamlessly into the gentle turning of the planetary spheres drifting through the heavens, wrapping the vulnerable human spirit in an eternal, secure embrace. Lingering curiosity melts away beneath the watchful gaze of ancient deities, allowing mortal consciousness to sink into a state of restoration in the cool night air. Drift weightlessly upon a calm, endless ocean of starlight, carried smoothly toward the most tranquil, dusky haze of night. The radiant clay tablets of destiny remain carefully sealed and safely stored by benevolent hands in the highest archives of the night sky. In this profound silence, the great river of memory flows back to wash away the dust of ages past, rest within the gentle tides of the cosmos, basking in the pure silver light of the celestial heavens.